also a professor at the University of Cincinnati. And today what I'm going to be talking to you guys about is how virtual reality is changing learning, changing the L&D realm, and changing us as learners in the workforce. And so today what we're going to have is we're going to have a detailed discussion about that. With me today, for all of you that aren't aware, we have Sean Montgomery and Aaron Godsey and Brittany Sinclair from Designing Digitally in here. So if you guys have questions, you can always use the Q&A section. We have some polls that we're going to do today, and what we're going to be going over for all of you that are educators and love learning objectives. We're going to talk about where we're at in VR, what are our options, what software and hardware to use, and who's using it, what they're doing with it, and how it's going to be changing us here in the near future. So without any further ado, again, I'm Andrew Hughes, President of Designing Digitally, and I want to start off first with a quote from what I believe to be one of the strongest quotes when it comes to looking at learning. For me, I've always tried to fundamentally break down the way that we learn into learning by doing and learning by experiencing. And the way that I explain this is we all were kids, and mom and dad told us, don't touch that, that's hot. And every single one of us did touch it, and every single one of us burnt our hand. And so today, we don't do that because we experience the outcome of doing that. And that's why we've learned from that experience of what to do and what not to do. So before we get deep into that, there's a couple things that I do want to go over. First and foremost, we will be working side by side on this material, but we also want to make sure that you guys participate. So I want to start off asking the first question of the day. My first question to you guys, are you currently planning to do any type of build or development at all in VR? Are you currently planning or building? And so currently you should have a pop-up right there that is asking you, are you planning a VR project? And the reason why I ask is not for Designing Digitally's point of view, it's to really see how many of you are actually utilizing this and how many of you are actually looking to invest in this and implement this or are currently doing that. So now that we have this and we have that poll, what I'd like to do is kind of move on and talk a little bit about the subject at hand. First off, what is virtual reality? The first thing that I can tell you is virtual reality really is not just all of these cool headsets. What it is it's using one of the senses that human beings use the most, our visual sense. And our visual sense allows us, and what we use to determine the external environment and the world in which we live in. And what I mean by that is I'm about to show you a really interesting experiment. And for any of you that have ever been in one of my workshops at Training Magazine or the eLearning Guild or any of those, you may have actually done this exercise before. For all of you, this was actually a scientific experiment, and you can try this at home with your kids. And what we do is we put a board up in between you, your real hand, and this fake prosthetic hand. And what we're going to do from here is we are actually going to take a feather, and we're going to stroke the prosthetic hand with the feather, and we're going to do the same thing, or a brush here, to your real hand. And what is going to happen is your brain is going to start associating the prosthetic hand with your real hand based on the fact that your brain visually sees that prosthetic hand down there and feels something. So the visuals in which you see are actually taking over any other sense that you currently are utilizing for this experiment, for this experience. And this happens the majority of the time because your visuals or your sight is one of the dynamic senses that you use. And as you can see, when they pound that hammer down on that hand, she flinched, she freaked out because what has happened is her brain has visually accepted the fact that that hand is now hers. So why is this so important to us in VR? Well, here's why. Because we're going to be able to utilize that sense to work with what's called neuroplasticity. And what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to train people and have them use that visual sense to experience an environment that they've never experienced, or they may have experienced and chosen to do the wrong procedure, policy, or steps in which they needed to do. Now, for all of you, neuroplasticity is something that we do all the time. And what this is it's our brain rewires neurons quite often. And what we're finding is we, as people, utilize neuroplasticity to really learn and change behaviors and to change the way we are. And VR is going to dynamically change this. And I want to kind of go over this real quick.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? Your brain is a dynamic, connected power grid. There are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
So why is that important? Because what is happening is in the past, we would have to do the rewiring of our brain, the learning of our brain within inside of an environment that we're currently in. And the hard part about that situation is, unless the environment is drastically changed or we're getting feedback consistently on that desired behavior that you want to see, it is very hard to change that behavior. So what does that mean? That means with VR, considering that visuals are one of the primary senses that we use as human beings, we can actually, that can help rewire the brain for not just workforce employees, but for everyone in the world by setting up environments and consequences and things that we would want to see based on the actions that they do. And I want to show you how effective this has been. So the first thing that I want to explain is gamers. Many of you in the past may have played Mario, may have been a big gamer, but one thing that I want to point out is the Massachusetts Institute did a study, and they found that if you play for 30 minutes a day for 2 months, you were to have an increased skill set of memory, fine motor skills, and strategic planning outside of people that do not play. What they have also found that I thought was extremely beneficial to people is they could easily find things such as, and I'll kind of fast forward through this part, where gamers such as people that play Call of Duty, that play first-person shooters, they were able to see finite details. They were able to see better colors. They were able to focus and have a much better visual long-distance sight. And the reason why is they are actively utilizing the parts of their brain that is focusing on something that has moved very quickly. Now, on top of that, utilizing video games for people that are getting older, you can find can help them be able to continue to evolve and be able to keep up to date on their mental status. And one thing that I think is interesting is I have a 96-year-old grandmother, and my 96-year-old grandmother plays cards, the old school solitaire and things every single day at her table. And she is as quick as she was when I was young. And what I've realized is she's continuously challenging herself with games and puzzles and things like that are helping her brain continue to evolve just like ours. So why virtual reality? So why has this become so hot and such a buzzword lately? Well, here's why this has become such a buzzword. I am 37 years old, and within my lifetime, this was myself playing Super Nintendo with the gun, and sitting in front of the old TV tubes, which my dad was a factory worker and he made these TV tubes. He's very proud of that. And the reason why I tell you this is this was my standard, what you're looking at here. Now, this is my 4-year-old son, Axton.
What is that? Is that a doggy?
And this is Axton playing. This is his standard. This is what he will grow up to play. This will be his video game console.
Where are you? Are you in a scientist's place?
So understand that this is the new standard for kids for video games. And we're not going to turn back. It's not just going to be on your screen.
Here, buddy.
And as you can
Don't
see,
worry, you're here with Mommy and Daddy. You're here with Mommy and Daddy.
He loves it, but he's very confused because his senses are making him feel he's in another environment.
Look around, see if you can find the doggy. Oh, there he is!
And he's trying to process that.
He needs to... he needs to have the controller, but yeah. Was that cool? Don't drop it. Oh!
Of course. He's a toddler. He dropped it. But the reason why, and again, I'm going to reiterate this. The standard for myself was Nintendo. The standard for our children that are growing up today will be VR. And as of today, we'll talk a little bit about the affordable options that we'll be able to do. Now, one thing that I want to point out is virtual reality is and can be utilized as a learning tool for so many different things. And I'm going to be talking about that today. But before we do, I want to tell you a little bit about learning, which many of you know. One of the issues that we have in the corporate training and the L&D space for any type of learning is learning retention. And learning retention has been really rough. We're constantly fighting them to remember what we're training them on. So I'm going to ask you guys a little poll question. Question time. If workers will forget of what they've learned within a month without revisiting the material, do you guys think they'll forget 50% within a month, 70%, 90%, 20%, or 10%? How much of that material do you think they actually give up, or they lose from the training and all that hard work we do? And we'll leave this out for just a minute. Remind me to get the sound effects for poll questions next time. So it looks like we're almost done with the polls. Got a few more quick votes happening here. Bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. And looking at this, ladies and gentlemen, I have good news. The majority of you have it correct. Believe it or not, it is 90% of the things that you train them within 1 month, they forgot. They do not remember the policies, the procedures, and the things that you've put in place. Now, here's the even scarier part. 70% of that is lost within the first day. So when they get done with your e-learning experience or that faculty training seminar or whatever industry you're working on, training engineers on how to do a procedure, the next day, 70% of that information is lost. And then, here's an even scarier. And for all of you, you guys probably see, we will provide the research. This is actually the research journal article completed for this. But they're now able to show us that 50% of the information that we provide after 1 hour is no longer retained. So, well, understand, if you give a 1-hour lecture such as this, what I'm finding is it depends on how active you are, how engaged you are, how interested you are in this information, and your mental capacity. That changes these variables. But this is what they found from the research. Now, what are we finding? Well, here's something really cool. We're finding ways to combat this, and VR allows this to happen. So the University of Maryland has taken the Oculus Rift, and what they've done is they took a art history class, which I think is fascinating because for all of you, you should know, I had to have 4 years of art history, and that is 2, 4, 6, 8 semesters of art history, where basically what it was academic academic bulimia. They would give us a slide deck, we'd have to memorize the picture and what happened to it, and then on Friday we'd spit it back out on paper. And the retention was low. I barely remember from 8 semesters. I know like the Madonna Enthroned and the obvious ones that people know, but not much after that. So what they did is the University of Maryland said, what if we were to put these into environments and make these into more of a fun, immersive experience to see if we give, and we'll do a control group, where we just do the traditional PowerPoint slide presentation of these images and information, and then we'll actually do this in VR. And what they found is 40% of the participants scored at least 10% higher in recalling the information and the people that they saw and the pictures that they saw compared to the people that were doing the traditional presentation style experience.
It's
now,
like a movie.
Now, one of the things I want to point out is Delta is actually pushing the envelope with VR. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but this is actually a training experience at Delta right now for you to actually try. So I'm going to show you guys this here briefly, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Or I'll just skip it right there, and then we'll talk about it.
It's like a movie almost, but you're inside of the movie. It's super, super realistic. You're able to like touch and grab and hold on to things, and you're not worried about hitting walls. I love it.
The virtual reality is a result of a project that we started back in 2017 to really rewrite our entire new hire curriculum. We wanted to introduce some new technology. We wanted to take it from an instructor-driven program to a learner-driven program.
We're going to have you finishing up this lesson, please. It's giving our flight attendants, the new hires, a chance to get inside the aircraft and actually see it as a virtual setting. Yeah, go ahead. Do your monitoring challenge first for me, though.
There are 12 rooms that are set up in the space that we have behind. Rooms are linked to one integrated instructor station where an instructor can review 12 students at the same time.
By increasing the number of students in the class at one time, we were able to reduce the number of months it took to train a number of flight attendants.
So, Ms. Perez, we're going to have you finishing up this lesson, please, and if you'd come on out, we're having you max out one more time.
The system is designed to train students on how to open doors, how to open emergency exits, and how to pre-check their emergency equipment on an aircraft. Everything's pretty self-guided.
It gives you a choice of airplanes to use. Right now we have the 737, 787, 777, and A321 aircraft.
I'm a very visual learner, so to be able to go into the aircraft and actually see the seats, see the overhead compartments, you can even open the lavatory doors and walk inside the lab. It really gives me a complete perspective of exactly what this aircraft looks like.
We integrated a system that they can actually use their hands and reach and touch. And that was important for us because we're trying to build muscle memory with a lot of the door operations. They can open a door, they can make errors like slow a slide. It's reset at the push of one button. If they make an error, we can step them back one step in the process, and they can continually train over and over and over again until they get a door right.
they prompt you and they let you like make mistakes without instructors or nervous students behind you making you anxious.
And I think it really helps the flight attendant put into their cognitive mind that one little mistake can make a huge error. And this lets them do that in that safe environment.
It definitely does give me confidence going out into the field.
I look at this as being something endless for American and having us be the complete innovator once again in the airline world.
We've always known that American has a rich.
So now that you guys have seen some of that in the flesh, I wanted to kind of point out one of the things you notice is they are not using controllers. It's because what they did is they built an integrated system of the Oculus or the HTC Vive or the Oculus Go, and then they also used the AR system, and they were able to use hand tracking with the Leap Motion device. And I'll show you some of that examples in a little bit. But before I do, we're going to talk a little bit about the types of virtual reality because we really need to define this in the industry. We have a lot of clients that want to do VR for everything, but there are limitations and different ways of doing this, and we're going to talk a little bit about the types. There are 3 different levels of and types of VR. You have your low, your medium, and your high, and we're actually going to be talking about these different types of levels. And that goes for production levels, hardware, software, things like that, okay? But before I do, we have another question. What VR devices have you ever used or tested or owned in your experience? Have you ever tried the Vive, the Oculus Rift or Go, the PlayStation VR, the Samsung Gear VR, or any of you tried to do Google Daydream View yet? Just curious on if anybody's tried and what you've experienced. You can choose more than one if you've tried them out. If you own them, awesome. Extra points for that. So just give it a minute here, and we'll find out, you know, what you've tested, what you've owned, what you've messed with. All right. Now that we see that, it looks like a lot of you have tried the Oculus and the HTC, the Vive. So we're going to start where we always start in training and learning. We're going to start with the lowest common denominator and work our way up. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the low-end solutions. The first one is Google Cardboard and just using your cell phone. One of the things that I want to point out about this is this works really well if you're going to do 360 video and you want to do kind of a spatial 360 video experience, or you have a one-click-like experience. It doesn't really work very well if you want to do something in a high fidelity, have them do a bunch of steps like what you saw with Delta. This is more if you want to know what it looks like to stand above the on top of the Himalayas. And, you know, it works really well if you have a 360 camera and you want to show people what it was like and have them be immersed and experienced it. But take into consideration that most of it is just maybe an interactive video. And not necessarily some 3D spatial, you know, game like to where you can walk around and pick up a sword and start hacking and slashing things. Then we have our medium solutions. Right now, looking at one of the more popular medium solutions is the Gear VR that is now populated with Oculus. It's still using your Samsung phone. However, they have put in quite a bit of integration between the Gear VR system and the Samsung phone. And what I mean by that is it uses like your gyro rotation. It uses multi-clicks. You can Bluetooth and add a controller if you want to, and it actually interacts with it. Things like that. A little more complex. It can do a lot more, but it's still not fully 3D spatial, so it still looks like a 3D video as if you're looking at your TV, but your TV is now in 3D, you know, is completely a holodeck surrounding you. It doesn't necessarily give you that 3D spatial to where you can look up and down and around, or, you know, go around something and then look behind it on your own. But there are some great examples. One of the really cool examples that I'll show you right here, and I'll mute it.
You follow the journey of the
is what I'm finding in VR, and I think this is excellent, and I think this is something especially for learning that can be extremely beneficial, and not just for history, but for training also, is what you're looking at is the Titanic experience. And basically what you do is you are in a first-person experience and you watch the Titanic go down and you watch everything that happens. Luckily, though, you're one of the people on one of the lifeboats, one of the 1,500 that actually made it out, and you get to actually experience this. And just think about some of the times that you look at your teenager, if you have any teenage kids or nieces or nephews, and you tell them something but they don't actually listen until they actually do it on their own. This is a great example to where I don't know if we have enough empathy over what's happened with the Holocaust or these mass shootings. But if we were to experience it ourselves, I'm sure we would have a much deeper feeling for those. And VR gives us that opportunity, and this is a great example of that. And then not only that, but you can go underwater and do a virtual experience. The great thing about VR, especially something like this, is you're actually utilizing a gaming engine to build this, so you can make that three-dimensional experience since it's not video. So we're going to talk a little bit about production tools for these lower and middle range experiences. First off, there's 360 cameras. One of the things I could forewarn you all about is there's a lot of different options for 360 cameras, ranging from everywhere from $99, like the Gear 360, all the way up to $2,500, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 cameras. You need to understand what are you going to be utilizing these for and how you're going to be utilizing it before you buy an insane camera, only to find that you could have done it with something half the price. But the cool part about this is, for any of you that have Adobe CC, the Adobe After Effects, now with the newest version of CC, you can actually import your video from your 360 camera into the After Effects, and it'll actually be a 360 video, and then you can put text over it or even hot buttons, things like that, and then export it out of After Effects. Export it out of After Effects, and it'll have like lettering, like you were editing a video and adding additional text or arrows or whatever you would want to do to that video scenario. And then in that medium range, a couple of technologies that we found that have been very beneficial for 360, especially on the web. A-Frame. A-Frame is an excellent JavaScript-based 360 VR type of framework that you can use to build your own 360 videos, 360 image galleries, make your own. Like we did a virtual tour for an onboarding experience before with it. So that's an excellent tool out there, and it is free. And then there's also Babylon.js, which is another JavaScript framework that we use here to actually develop out some of the serious games and VR build pieces. It's all using WebGL, which WebGL and WebVR are the two standards now that we've gotten rid of Flash. That will allow this stuff to be on the web browser. But the cool part is if it notices that it's a WebVR build, when you have your headset on and if you use the browser on any one of your headsets and you go to the page, it will pop up asking, would you like to play this on the VR? And you can actually do that, which makes it pretty cool. And then not only that, but we have the higher end solutions. These are the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift, the PlayStation VR. One thing that I don't want to point out that I didn't put in here real quick is in the medium solutions, I know I talk about the Samsung VR, but one that I own and I find to be amazing, I don't know where the Samsung VR is the Oculus Go. And the Oculus Go is basically, in my opinion, in between the high end and the medium range. It has a 3D spatial. It's basically a built-in computer without having to have a video card, or you can do the majority of the stuff that you can do on these with inside of the Oculus Go. And it's under $200. So what does that mean? We're now at a point in VR where it can be affordable. You're going to spend, $1,000 to $2,000 per employee this year on training, at least. So, you know, 1/10 of that could be the purchase of these that could be reused for training or even issued to the employees for training. So there's something about that we need to keep in mind is these prices are dropping drastically. Currently, the higher end ones, the Vive, the Rift, and the PlayStation VR, there's a couple things you should know. The Vive, the Rift, both of these are PC-based, and they do need a VR video card. That's usually quite expensive, so while you may just purchase this device, you do need to take into consideration that you have to have the hardware ability to be able to run that. The PlayStation VR has everything built in and will plug into your existing PlayStation. Take into consideration, though, that not all games are just VR on the PlayStation just because you bought the PlayStation VR. You have to actually have VR-related games on the PlayStation to be able to use it. And this is a big thing that I want to talk about. Those devices, along with the Go, actually develop out what's called 3D spatial virtual reality. And what this is the ability for you to actually move around in a physical space. This is a great example. If you guys play or actually utilize Steam, which is a platform in which video games are built, or not built, but released and sold, we actually developed out a training simulation probably about 1 to 2 years ago for a gas and energy company. And what they wanted to do is be able to understand how to cut trees down in a residential location without damaging the actual property or damaging power lines or the actual worker. So once we finished it, we actually asked the company if we could possibly just take the free roaming experience and put it out on Steam for free so people can see what the possibilities are to be able to utilize simulated VR experiences. So if you do have a Steam account, you have a VR device, you can actually download this for free. It's called VR Chop and Drop, and you can try it out. But it gives a great example of what you can do in a simulated experience. And it is fully spatial 3D, so you are fully immersed into there, could walk around, drive the boom truck, do whatever you would like. Now we're going to talk about how do you build this stuff. Well, for all of you that are in the L&D realm, we are not using Storyline or Captivate or Canvas or any of that stuff to build this stuff. What we're using are gaming engines. And the first one I'll talk about is the Unreal Engine. The Unreal Engine, you know, give you guys a little bit of history. The Unreal Engine was one of the heavy market players. And what happened is they had some pretty hefty licensing fees. And once a different model came out, which was the free to use until you do a commercial, until you export out for a commercial version, Unreal was basically the dominant development platform. And then that and a couple other platforms started popping up with the free to use, and you pay a license for the software if you want to export out for commercial use. Another one is Heroes Engine. The Heroes Engine actually I find is utilized quite often for a lot of MMOs, but can also be used for VR builds. And then one of the more popular ones, one of our favorite, the Unity Engine. Those guys were the ones that actually disrupted the industry with a free to use, and then once you want to go commercial with your game, you would pay and purchase the actual software. And they have some great tools to be able to do your VR builds and integrations and things like that. But not only that, but these are in 3D, so if you notice, these are all 3D models with textures on them. So this isn't, you know, painted or a picture. So all of these 3D models had to either be made or utilized or pulled out of an asset system or something of that nature. So that means you will need to be able to do some 3D modeling and possible animation and then import it into Unity. And to do so, there's quite a few different options that you can do for that too. For instance, there are things like Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max, Blender, Maya, and Houdini. Blender is open source, and that is a 3D modeling and animation software. And then 3D Studio Max and Maya are owned by Autodesk, which those individuals, Maya is our preferred, but 3D Studio Max is fantastic too. And then Houdini is another open source build, and the Cinema 4D has been along and around to make a lot of different like environmental experiences, or if you want to make an environment, Cinema 4D does a really good job of that. And I mean like mountain ranges, jungles, things like that. So, you know, in regards to this, one of the questions that I have, because I've kind of went over some of this information with you guys pretty quickly, but guess what time it is? It's question time. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not beneficial and 5 being very beneficial, how do you feel virtual reality would benefit your company? And so here we go. On a scale 1 to 5, 1 being nope, 5 being man, oh man. This would stop us from getting hurt and help us with this, that, and the other. Now, it's funny because everyone goes, well, what does VR lend itself to? You know, based on what I'm seeing, if you want somebody to experience anything at all, you could use VR for about any of it. So now that we have that poll completed, I'm going to talk a little bit about why. Why are we actually looking at VR other than the fact that we know we're going to, at the beginning I talked about the learner retention of knowledge and how far that has dropped off, and what is actually happening when it comes to the data and information that we're presenting to them. But I want to show you some really interesting things. First and foremost, you all should know that 722 people will die this year resulting from contact with objects or equipment in the workforce. And this was 2015, so I'm sure that number has increased. But take into consideration that that's 722 people. That's a lot of people that lost parents, mothers, fathers, nieces, nephews, uncles, aunts, daughters, sons. And so take into consideration that if we could build something that maybe costs more, take longer to build, but save just half of those, would or should we do it? In my opinion, I think so. Another interesting fact, looking at this, Capterra actually did research and found that with those safety issues that I just showed you out of 722, people that actually have implemented VR with inside of their workforce have been saving an average of $2,000 per training program from reductions in insurance and injury-related costs across the company from utilizing these tools, because again, since the number one sensory tool that you use are your eyes, we're immersing you into experiences that you may see in the workplace and allowing you to actually make the decisions that we want you to make if you're put into those situations. That is going to be preventable. That is exactly the same reason why we have to go to the doctor for a checkup. What I also think is a quite interesting fact is KFC developed out simulation training of their preparation and cooking. And after their actual research and completion of their research, they have actually saved 15 minutes per employee by having them utilize the VR training simulation and learning how to do it there before actually putting them on the floor. So that is an insane amount of time that is being saved considering the volume of KFC. Now, that's per employee also, not just per training session. That's every single one of the employees. They're saving 15 minutes that they can be back into work times, you know, the 100,000 employees that they have. That's a lot of money that's being saved just from cutting and reducing time. And I said it before, I'm going to say it again. Learning is experience. Everything else is just information for them. That means if you can get them immersed, tell a compelling story, and get them to actually experience it and do the outcomes that you would like them to do, you're more likely going to have knowledgeable workforce that is performing at the level in which is going to make your company excel and succeed. But I am going to play devil's advocate. It is not the solution for everything. What do I mean by this? Many of you, if you're especially in your education realm, know about Bloom's taxonomy levels. Your lower levels of Bloom's, such as remembering data and information, such as what's my passcode, things like that, you do not need to make a VR experience out of that. What you need to do is understand the trials and tribulations and the major problems and things like people getting hurt, people having compliance issues, people having this issue, that issue, dealing with customers, dealing with difficult customers, working in the retail locations, building, working on construction projects, things like that. Anything that you can really think of that is a strong systematic experience or even a procedure-based experience or even anything hands-on could be done very well. But lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy where they just need to remember how to file, it's necessarily need a VR experience. And I think it's more of use of common sense and ensuring that it's going to provide you a positive business ROI. So what do you do next? What should you try to do if you want to go down this realm of getting involved in VR? First and foremost, the research team here at Designing Digitally is doing an amazing job at producing resources for everyone. We're doing research white papers. They're taking the data and information that we're gathering from all of the surveys and data from our clients from over 15 years and really looking at what kind of data and information do we have. And then we're providing those for resources for you guys. So check that out, designingdigitally.com resources. And we also have white papers, like I just talked about, at designingdigitally.com/whitepapers. And we also have infographics. Those infographics, again, from that report, those reports and that data that we gather. And then last but not least, we always have a blog post each and every day, so you guys can take a look at that material. And then if you do need help with VR or you're looking to do something like this, the guys here as the learning solution specialists here at Designing Digitally, that's their job. They are here to help you, guide you, walk you through, and even partner if you need to ensure that you are able to get a pat on the back once this project is completed and not just a, oh, we tried that and it doesn't work. And before we're done, one of the things that I wanted to ask you all is, it's question time. The last question of the day. Do you feel that this webinar was beneficial? No, just don't judge me on my terrible music, okay? I wasn't prepared for any of that good nonsense. One of the things that I do want to also point out for all of you is the software like Unity is free, Blender is free, A-Frame is free, Babylon.js is free. So there's a lot of things that you can use to be able to develop out these learning experiences and to be able to actually create something that is effective and engaging and fun. You don't have to be some slick programmer to do it, depending on what you want to do. Not only that, but if you want to get as simplistic as, you can take your iPhone and make 360 pictures and then import them into A-Frame and utilize that. So you can get as simple as you would like, or you can go all out and build a full-out video game and put it on Steam. It's really whatever you would like to. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say thank you very much to me. I am here, and you can shoot me an email or give our office a call at 866-316-9126. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. I did want to open it up and leave us a few minutes just to see if there's anybody that has any questions. You can possibly put it in the Q&A section. And I do know that Sean and Aaron are here. So if anyone has any questions for them also, you can just put it in the Q&A and they should be able to get you any answers to any of your questions. And in the meantime, one of the other last things that I could tell you is if you get a chance and you need to buy a really cool present for someone, look at the Oculus Go. It's under $200 on Amazon, and it's worth every penny. I can certainly assure you of that. So without any further ado, thank you all for coming today. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to our team possibly helping you or collaborating with you guys in the future. And until then, stay creative.